this is kind of like the arc of a researcher in UFOs. You start with the nuts and bolts, you start with the little grays, and then it kind of slowly moves into some type of hybrid psionic. Oh, okay, there's some, mind melding happening here with the technology, with these beings. You go a little further and you go, oh, hold on, some of these beings aren't even physical. It's like, wait, what? Are these craft physical? They are. Some of them are. Some of them are just orbs. Are these things that we're interacting with just a product of some, whether it's interdimensional or whether it's just some other realm interacting with us and instantiating these physical objects for some reason, that these things present themselves in whatever way, shape, or form they need to? So then you start thinking about, well, why are they instantiating in this way? And it could be, this is where it gets really trippy and where it kind of becomes unifying, mining us in some way.
I was about to say that it is novel times, but when is it not novel times? When is the McKennian novelty wave surging toward the singularity, not just peaking higher and higher? Like, it just feels like it's like this has to be the top of the novelty peaks, and then it just keeps getting weirder and crazier. And you're one of my favorite people to talk to about that.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad to be here. And definitely that I think about that Terence McKenna sort of monologue every week. I think as things get stranger and stranger, yet high strangeness increases around the phenomenon and around just politics and social media, and everything is culminating to this inevitable crescent of I don't know. There's critical mass happening on every front, but I'm here for it. We got front row tickets, courtside to the end of the world, so it's kind of neat.
It does feel like the boundaries are being stress tested big time, though.
Yeah,
and not in a way where it's kind of like, man, how much? I don't know. Like it really actually feels like there are specific things we can say. Like the obvious thing we have to start with is the promise of disclosure from the President of the United States, right? Like, that's kind of the end game of a certain kind of novelty. Like, you can't really, until the information itself is released,
right?
You really can't have another person in a higher position that we know of. Say for like some member of the Guardian, like MJ-12, Plato's Cave Keepers coming out and being like, no, actually, we've been in charge the whole time. Just kidding, guys.
Even then, we had that with Harold Malmgren pretty much. And it really didn't change much. But having a sitting president is definitely a first. That's a first. Him just acknowledging it. Not saying he'll find anything, but him saying we're looking into aliens on a serious level. Not the most surprising thing that guy said, but definitely welcome.
I saw that you captured that moment between you and Jesse and Gerb when that, just as that Truth Social post dropped.
Okay, breaking tweet right now. Donald J. Trump. What did we talk about Truth Social recently?
Yeah.
And we're just getting this now. This is live. Based on the tremendous interest shown, I will be directing the Secretary of War and other relevant departments and agencies to begin the process of identifying and releasing government files to alien and extraterrestrial life, unidentified aerial phenomena, and unidentified flying objects, UFOs, and any and all other information connected to these highly complex but extremely interesting and important matters. God bless America.
I just got the chills.
Me too.
That is insane.
And it's hard not to be excited about that, right?
Yep.
But now that it has percolated for a week and a half now, what is your assessment of it? How are you feeling about it?
Still feel the same. I think initially there was this hopefulness that you would feel, as we're all together. It did feel synchronistic at the time. We all happened to be, in the same room while this was happening during a discussion about the thing that was happening, and just all sorts of synchronicities were aligning. So it did feel, I think, heavier than it actually is. That being said, I think I do feel that same hopefulness. Maybe it's dissipated a little bit naturally, but the one thing that a lot of people, I think, as soon as you mention this guy, this president, right, it triggers a lot of negative reaction in both directions. It triggers negative discourse in all sorts of fashion. So one thing I wanted to steer clear of was political talk, especially on sort of the social media side. I really don't try and get into it, and I really don't bother with it.
Same.
But this felt like a net positive in every direction. And it's really hard for people who don't agree with Trump. And I'm not saying I do agree with Trump, because as a Canadian, I'm kind of apolitical to the whole thing. But I look at it from a lens of, okay, is this bringing us closer or further away from what we're trying to, get to? And I think him just acknowledging that on a public platform generates a mass amount of interest that can't be redacted or retracted. And that will obviously spawn some new research, will obviously spawn the curiosity of a lot of new people getting into the subject. I'm sure everyone who covers this stuff has seen a small uptick in the amount of people viewing their content, right? So all of a sudden we're sort of raising, the tide here. And then for people who don't agree with anything he says and want to completely, negate whatever it is that he's talking about, fair enough, by the way. Those people are going to sort of fan a flame in the direction of looking into, his past transgressions and his alleged, connection to, the ring that these elites were running, and so I think it favors that too. If we want to get angry at Trump, then we dig into the Epstein files, which is a net positive. And if we want to say, hey, Trump did a good thing, and then it inspires people to look into UFOs, which inevitably, we're talking about transparency. And I think transparency exists on all front. If we get transparency in the Epstein files, I think we get transparency on the UFO stuff too. I don't think there's one without the other.
Yeah.
And so I think a net positive. That being said, I'm not holding my breath for him to actually uncover something. I'm not naive. I know that the likelihood of anything coming directly from the president or people who work under the president, or even so far as Congress, I just think it's unlikely. And I'm definitely not delusional. But I do think, as a researcher and someone who's looking into this topic, all it's going to do is really broaden the spectrum of the amount of people who are interested in this subject.
Yeah. I mean, it will inevitably have that effect for sure. And I think that is a good thing too. And I just have to say that it feels like this is a time where, again, sort of in the way of saying that we're getting close to the prestige moment in magic, right? Like the moment where the trick is revealed. It feels like the person who actually has the ability to tell us, at least to the extent of what they know, is about to be like, all right, you want to see under the kimono? I'll show you.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it feels like that kind of a moment. But in that moment, I mean, I was about to say something, but what's your first thought as a magician?
Well, I mean,
that's an,
magic works best when the audience fools themselves. And so it happens in your mind, right? So like, we'll give you the components to a trick, and we'll lead you down the path of self-discovery. Of you're going to discover this method by yourself and create the illusion in your mind that you found the method. The magician knowingly plants those seeds, allows you to come up with your own method, and then because of that method, fools you even harder. Because now you're given the how, and the how doesn't line up with what's happening in front of you, and so you're kind of left bewildered. And that's something that magicians do. We have outs, and we have, even David Copperfield used to tour the world and he would have 2 or 3 backup methods for every illusion.
Wow.
Depending, because I think there was this instance in India when a gentleman went on like national TV over there and sort of showed everyone how one of his illusions worked. I think it was like a mass levitation or something. And he went sort of behind the curtain and said, this is how he does it. And Copperfield then, being the greatest magician of our time at the time, showed up to India only to bring this guy forward and do the illusion and then challenge him to disprove it using that method. And he couldn't. And so he regained his favor. But in reality, the guy probably guessed the right method. And then they sort of, reworked the method to look identical in terms of the effect, but the mechanics of it were vastly different and sort of countered, what he was proposing.
Yeah, and you basically just said in a better way what I was thinking, which is that the moment of the reveal is the magician's final opportunity to do another trick, right? And or it's an opportunity to be like, oh, you think you know what it is? And then move the pieces around in a way that is opaque to the participant so that they can't solve it.
Oh,
so, I mean,
yeah,
and
letting people
obviously
figure it out themselves is the strongest form of magic. It is 100%. If I tell you something's impossible, you don't care. But if your mind comes to that conclusion by itself without me telling you, it's far stronger.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've seen you do it actually. I've seen some of it firsthand. But it's funny because this just maps 1-to-1 to the phenomenon.
Sure.
And of course now in magic circle or magic milieu, not magic circles. Maybe we can get into magic circles later on in the conversation. But we would say, oh, it's another layer to the trick, or it's another form of the trick. And in phenomena, declassification, intelligence talk, we would say it's a psyop. It's another opportunity to further some agenda, to insert something, to obfuscate for something, to serve as a catalyst for some other thing. And I think obviously we still have to be thinking that way in terms of like whatever the powers that be put in front of us. And then there's all these other questions downstream of it, right? But I think broadly, I was looking at it as one of 3 potentials when I read that. One is exactly what we just said. Okay, this could be an absolute psyop. This could be another pretense for doing something else. 2, which I think is very interesting, and I think could be the case, honestly, is that there is some unseen thing or some orthogonal factor that's about to happen, and they know it's about to happen, which would be akin to disclosure in and of itself. Like some event, something is going to happen, some threshold, some technology is going to reveal something ontologically to a large number of people to a point where, hey, you know what? To save our own credibility, we need to do some level of disclosure to show that we're not completely caught off guard here by whatever's about to happen. The third thing is it's just a great opportunity for someone with a large ego to be like, I'm the one who did it. I'm the one who revealed the secrets.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly think all 3 are pretty possible.
Yeah, they can probably coexist.
That is true.
If one, if you're looking for and again, the way that I bring this back to is like a magic trick. And if I'm creating a magic trick and while thinking about it, I have the variables that I want to achieve. So when a magician creates a magic trick and he sits down with his magician consultant friends and they brainstorm, a few hundred years of magic methods to try and figure out how to create an illusion. One way of creating a magic trick is starting with the variables, right? So, for instance, like I want somebody to vanish, but I want it to be broad daylight. I want it to be surrounded and I want it to be gradual. I want it to be a gradual vanish, not like an instant man. Like these are like cool. Mm-hmm. So now that we have the bones, we can go, okay, those are the variables. How can we achieve this, right? And so if the variables are, we got to keep Trump happy. We gotta soften something because something's coming.
Yeah.
and we want to misdirect away from the Epstein files. How do we do all of that at once? Well, one way that I would do it is have Obama go, Donald doesn't know anything about the files. He doesn't know anything about UFOs. He'll never declassify UFOs. I mean, that's all you have to do.
Totally.
That's the method. Just have
you think so?
Obama, slightly subtly during some interview shitting on Trump. And that'll be enough to have Trump do what he did, or at least, look like the guy who had the idea. And that's
right.
What, if you were controlling it from behind the scenes, that's what you would want. You would want Trump to feel like the smartest guy in the room, and that you want him to think that all these ideas are coming from him. And so you manipulate the situation around him so that he himself comes to that conclusion. And then you go, wow, how smart, Mr. President. Absolutely. We're looking into this right away.
Yeah. And, that moment in the interview where Obama said, well, yeah, there are aliens, and then he went on to say, there's nothing underground at Area 51. I haven't seen them, whatever.
Yeah.
A lot of people took that as a significant statement. I felt like that was an absolute nothing burger. I'm like, this is what they all say in interviews. They make some kind of broad statement where they're not really saying anything, where I think if you stopped any guy on the street, they would probably say something to the effect of, yeah, the universe is so big, there's got to be something.
Yeah.
And that was essentially what he said there. But it felt like...
Well, he wasn't answering a question. He wasn't answering the question. He answered the question with the biggest revelation as if it was nothing.
Exactly.
And then shifted to, and this is another tactic that you can use, right? In terms of magic, if I show you, if I tell you something is important, it usually isn't. And if I go, don't worry about this, that's usually the important part. And it's very simple. But if a magician, for instance, has a coin and say, watch the coin, look, nothing up my sleeves, right? And instantly the sleeves don't matter. If he's making a big deal about the sleeves, it's because the sleeves aren't in play at all. But it's when the magician goes, and where's my lighter? That's the important part, because that's where he's getting away with the sleight of hand. And that's the part your brain deletes, right? And so you get away with a lot of the magic during these offbeat moments. And so when I see him go, oh, aliens are real, yeah, but nothing's in the thing, right? And I go, well, he's probably right. There are no aliens underground at Area 51. They're probably at Mitre, Battelle, Pax River. Like who knows, right? All these other black sites, these unacknowledged special access program sites. And in fact, at Area 51, there's probably just like stealth bomber tech and advanced prosaic propulsion. And so that's what I got out of it. And the most important part was like, yeah, aliens are real. And throwing that away. So for me, I saw it a little bit differently.
Yeah, I can totally see that take as well. But I think what's clear, at least to me, what felt intuitively clear, was it seemed like Trump seized on that moment. He took that opportunity to do something that it felt like was already in the cards. Like there were already people close to him saying he's got a speech ready. He's really heavily considering it. And it seemed like maybe he just seized on that moment as a sort of impetus to do something he wanted to do anyway. Because I really thought I'm sure you saw the thing with him on Air Force One.
Yep.
Where he said, oh, he shouldn't, that's very classified.
He
should
felt
not
more
have said
slighted.
Mm-hmm.
That Obama would reveal it before him. That's what I got out of that.
That makes sense.
I feel he looked a little slighted, son of a bitch.
Yeah, it was like an opportunity for him to.
And so instantly after does it, right, to try and cover it up and win that glory. And as he said right at the top of the tweet was due to popular demand. And that says a lot about who he is.
Yeah. Okay, two other directions I really want to go with this. Friends, I have been doubling down on content over in the YouTube members section and on Patreon. So if you desire further novelty, point your qualia, in said directions. If you do join up at patreon.com/third eye drops, you will also get access to a patron only Discord and other rewards. Or if you just want that content, flip over to the member section here on YouTube and become an initiate. So much love for supporting, and back to the mind meld. I'm just gonna go with the other piece of completely novel breaking news right now, which is that General McCasland going missing. And for people that don't know who McCasland is, he was the former head of the Air Force's Science and Research Division. And he literally oversaw Wright-Patterson, not just Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, but he oversaw that entire program that's headquartered there. Of course, it's famously associated with Roswell, but widely speculated to potentially be the heart of maybe like reverse engineering efforts or, exotic programs that people in UFO land like just salivate about, right? Not only was he that guy, he was the person in the leaks that was shown to be communicating with Tom DeLonge and Peter Levenda and telling them, unbelievably novel and evocative things. Like, if you want to understand the phenomenon, you have to look into mythology, particularly look into the Prometheus myth. And that guy just happens to mysteriously go missing like a week after Trump says he's going to, direct all of his people. 68.
That's pretty young.
So old enough where you could plausibly be like, is there something going on? And maybe, that is a total possibility.
Yeah.
I don't just want to jump to the sexiest, most conspiratorial possibility. But, oh my God, does that feel like a huge possibility? That this guy is too important of a piece or too dangerous of a piece, and he's got to either be, it could be either direction, right? Like maybe it was maybe it's a disappearance for his own safety.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it's a disappearance for the complete opposite.
Or maybe he is slipping and then they made him disappear because they're like, well, we can't have him slip up.
Yeah.
But that's all speculation. I do think it's interesting, that sort of framework of mythology, is something I'm getting more and more interested in. And partially thanks to, your knowledge and your podcast as well, because this is something you tackle quite a bit of in the, in the whole philosophical scope. And at first, to someone looking into like nuts and bolts stuff, this is kind of like the arc of a researcher in UFOs. If you start with the nuts and bolts, you start with the little grays, the reticulans or whatever, the zetas, and then it kind of slowly moves into some type of hybrid psionic. Oh, okay, there's some, mind melding happening here with the technology, with these beings. And then it gets into, you go a little further and you go, some of these beings aren't even physical. It's like, wait, what? Are these craft physical? They are. Some of them are. Some of them are just orbs. Some of them are floating people. What's going on here? And, and then your brain has a hard time merging the two realities, right? Because rightfully so, how can something be considered real if it's non-physical? And that is a really difficult terrain to navigate because there doesn't seem to be a unifying theory in traditional sort of streamlined research that explains both the physical and the non-physical aspect of the phenomenon. You go from, well, it's either a psyop, it's all made up, or there's aliens, and the rest of it is, I guess, lucid dreaming. There's no real connector there, but then you hear about things like, people having physical markings on their body from a non-physical contact, and all these other in-betweens where it just gets stranger and stranger yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my journey, and as well as the journey of so many other researchers, including Grant Cameron, who I just had on, and Jacques Vallee, and probably Hal Puthoff, and so many other people, and I would assume this general as well. you get into the territory of this sort of egregorian theory where
Yeah.
are these things that we're interacting with just a product of some, whether it's interdimensional or whether it's just some, I don't know, other realm interacting with us and instantiating these physical objects for some reason, for whatever reason that is, and Grant Cameron has a really interesting theory. His theory is the theory of wow.
Yeah.
And so that these things present themselves in whatever way, shape, or form they need to. So they'll sort of scan your consciousness in a, maybe in a layman's sense, and discover what it is they need to do to create this sense of wonder and amazement and curiosity in you. And so they'll find that and then, make that happen. I like the idea of that theory. I'm not fully on board with that because there are so many cases where that just absolutely makes no sense. So then you start thinking about, well, why are they instantiating in this way? And it could have to do with, this is where it gets really trippy and where it kind of becomes unifying, mining us in some way, mining whether it's experience or mining the perpetual or sort of perpetuation of entropy in consciousness. And so as soon as we have like a linear, collective linear space of thought, it presents itself so that we go, wow, and then our minds expand. Looking at this date here, 1648, when the beginning of like sort of the Illumination period and the end of the 30-year war, where all these the Roman Catholics were fighting amongst themselves in Europe because some people were, it was a religious war between like Protestants and Catholics, and at the end of which they said, hey, let's separate this into sovereign states and you guys can all do your own religion and govern your laws accordingly. And so politics and religion became sort of separate in 1647, 1648, around there. But that also created this sort of, a lot of people started traveling across Europe and sharing ideas for the first time and not being afraid to do so, which then started separating science and religion. And, because of that, we're all of a sudden, and during that time, there was a lot of sightings as well, right? So you think, oh, are these things happening at these peak moments in time or to these key individuals to just perpetuate this ongoing curiosity or this ongoing, at least, seeking of different sort of experience and knowledge rather than, hey, we all funnel together. If you look at the wars and stuff, like had Hitler won the Second World War, it would have been this totalitarian regime, which would have been pretty bad for free thinking, and consciousness expanding experiments. And so now again, we have things happening and these things showing up at really key points in history. And so I don't know where I'm going with this, but it seems like I'm being led in this direction. The more you look into this stuff, the trippier it gets. And then you try to find this unifying theory for it all. And you end up with something like these, these allegories that you keep talking about, and these philosophical sort of notions of we're interacting with these daemons or whatever they are. And it gets really, it becomes full circle, which is kind of strange.
Totally, man. Yeah. It's okay if you don't know where you're going with it, because I know where I actually want to go like 15 different directions with it. But one thing, I guess let's clarify what you meant when you said egregore, because I'm guessing most people who watch the channel know what that is, but it's an important concept. It comes out of like Western esoteric thought. And it's essentially the idea that a group of people can kind of create a thought form. So your community, Area 52, there could be this like, there's you and there's the audience and there's the information, and that gives rise to this almost like psychic exhaust that forms this psychical structure over the top of everything that is Area 52, right? And that in and of itself can become like a being. And in the Tibetan tradition, there's a very similar concept of the tulpa. And the tulpa is essentially like a concretized thought form that can literally appear in front of people. And this has crazy implications for the phenomena potentially. And this is what people like Anthony Peake.
Yes.
He thinks CE5 type things are egregore events, that
Right.
the psychic energy of these people is causing something to appear. So that is one possibility. But I actually like what you were saying more, in that there's something in the sort of intersection between the phenomena and the mind that's experiencing it. And it's not that the mind is causing it, it's that the mind has to try to use an available concept to try to make sense of something that is of a higher ontological level than it is. So it's almost like this meeting between your mind and something that would melt your fucking face if you saw it in its true form, because your mind would be like, you know, the experiences people have in like the DMT realm or something, where they are just so in awe, and then they come back and they're trying to describe this, a being that is shape-shifting hyperbolic geometry, but it also seems to be an actual intelligence that is way hyper advanced and way beyond what the feeble human intellect can grok, right?
Yeah, and this also explains why during some witness accounts, witnesses see vastly different things. There's this example, I think Jacques Vallee actually talks about this, where there's a family in a car driving and they have a sunroof, and they look up and they see a craft. They all see a craft right over the car. Clear as day, best picture you'll ever take. And they take a picture. And then when they have the picture developed, it's a tiny speck of light. And they all swear they saw something. And so there's this idea too that like it's projecting itself into your mind differently. You know, we see things and they're slightly different. No two accounts of gray beings are the same.
Right.
It, like, really ask questions when you get into, sort of these encounters, these abductions. Sometimes they're naked, sometimes they're not, sometimes they're genderless. Sometimes they have a blue suit, a black suit, turtleneck, no turtleneck. Their eyes are, sure, almond shaped, black. Sometimes they're not wearing contacts. Sometimes they have a mouth, no mouth. Sometimes they're speaking, they're not speaking. It's never 100% the same. So either we're dealing with 100,000 species here, or we're dealing with something that might be using whatever collective knowledge that you've gained or that it feels you've gained.
Yeah.
Because I do think it's reactionary too. I don't think it's predictive, because it happens after events, which tells me that like, oh, there is a way to sort of like defeat this thing or whatever, outsmart it. But yeah, it would explain why so many experiencers see something, and yet what they're seeing isn't the same as what everybody else saw that same time.
Yeah.
And it just might be instantiating in a different way into different people's consciousness.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, and to throw even more flavor on this, and to, I think, to buttress this point even more, this is 100% where I'm at with not just what we would consider to be the UFO phenomenon, but with whatever higher beings are in particular. I think it has to be something like this meeting process, and it's not just me saying this. This came up. I've said this so many times on the show, but it's because it's such an important point. I think I was talking to this guy, Professor Jeff Kripal, maybe a year and a half ago now on the show, and he's so fascinating because he's just this extraordinarily unique person in academia. He'd be an awesome guest for your show, actually, where he is a highly respected. He's kind of like a Diana Pasulka type, where he is a highly respected religious scholar, but he particularly looks into the paranormal, psychedelics, UFO phenomenon, stuff like that, as a cultural phenomenon and near-death experiences.
You're right.
And he said this to me. He said, I take all of it seriously, but not literally. And I dug into that and I said, I think when you're saying that, you're not saying that you don't think something is really happening, but you think the way people are experiencing it is not the truth of
We
what's
know
really
that.
happening.
We know that for a fact.
Yes, and that's what he said.
Yeah.
So he said the exact same thing, and then we got into this unbelievably trippy conversation where it feels like, again, you're hitting some kind of boundary on what a human can know, where you're like, who's showing the image then? If I'm not selecting it, and the outer force is not it,
Mm-hmm.
like where is the selection process occurring? And so months later, I'm reading some Iamblichus, who is like 200 AD Platonic mystic. And he, in a lot of ways, is doing the beginnings, if not the beginnings, he is the popularizer of a lot of what we would conceive of like Western esoteric occult stuff now, where he's a philosopher, but he's also doing like rituals. He's also trying to bring like summon divine energies and like bring them down into him so they can like work through him and stuff. And there's a passage in his most famous work called On the Mysteries where he literally says something like, humans both, or the theurgist, so the person doing the ritual, both sees the god but never sees the god, because whatever it is not like a instantiated
No.
being. It's like this archetypal energy that, again, would just absolutely melt your face if you ever saw anything even close to what it truly is. So it has to almost like step itself down,
Sure.
dumb itself down into something that you can recognize, and it can communicate with you through like a mask or something.
But
Yeah.
why, right? Let's say that all that's real.
Yeah.
All the summoning, the egregores, the interdimensional beings, the lady, the orbs, the UFO, the solid craft, the beings who are sometimes depicted as almost doll-like, who are soulless. Like, yeah, what if all of that is just some product of a control system or some type of system that exists around? Why, right? Why would they be doing this? What's your best guess?
Well, I wouldn't draw a circle around all of it as if it's one thing. I think, again, and this is where I'm going to go to my overly battered but still well intact favorite example of Plato's cave, where it's like, what level of Plato's cave are we looking at this from, right?
Sure.
Because if we're still in the level of looking at the shadow on the wall and saying that is real, right? That's where we're at. But if we're at the level where we're starting to see the light coming from the outside now, those are two different ontological levels of whatever we're talking about. So I think something like the control system would be like who in the Plato's cave allegory, right? To speed run it. Socrates, one of the most famous thought experiments ever, where he's essentially trying to explain what the human condition is, all of reality is. Very simulation theory like. There's don't ask why, it's just a thought experiment. There's prisoners chained up in a cave. They've never been outside. They're looking at a cave wall and they see shadows on the cave wall. And unbeknownst to them, there's unknown entities behind them projecting, like they're holding up like little simulacra of here's a woman, here's an animal, whatever. And they're just shining it in front of the fire. And they're seeing these like dramas play out on the wall and they think that's real. They don't know there's a fire. They don't know there's guardians showing the things. So I think probably what we're talking about is like that, where there's something akin to the people holding the things that are creating the shadows.
Sure.
And then I think there's a higher reality outside.
But
so
why?
I think,
Why are we chained up? To what end can you conceive? Does like that provide like what? And the only thing that I can think of piecing together, any little tidbit of, all the conversations that I've heard and the documents that I've read through, and obviously one thing that stands out to a lot of people, for some reason, this just kind of like hits home, is the container comment by Bob Lazar. I don't care where you're from, but if you hear that, you go, ugh.
It's so far out.
All right, your objection has been noted.
Okay.
What does it say?
that we're containers. That's how supposedly the aliens look at us. That we are nothing but containers.
Containers of
Containers. Maybe containers of souls. You can come up with whatever theory you want, but we're containers, and that's how we're mentioned in the documents. That religion was specifically created, so we have some rules and regulations for the sole purpose of not damaging the containers.
the soul. Meaning,
Well, the souls or the bodies, or whatever. Right? That's
meaning like we're containers for souls that they're going to use at some other point.
right.
And that they had something to do with different prophets and biblical figures.
Yeah.
That rubs me weirdly, and I feel like there's something there.
Yeah.
And so, you think of what makes us special, if anything at all. It's not going to be our physical nature. It's not going to be our architecture. It's not going to be anything we make. It'll be something non-physical. Something like perhaps curiosity, individualism, inspiration, maybe hopefulness, love, and maybe just all of that, right? Maybe the idea of individual consciousness. If you're in let's say the universe is filled with, intelligent life. Studying one person and one person's individual consciousness would be like studying a whole civilization if they were telepathic.
Yeah,
Right?
that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
So each one of us might be a civilization unto ourselves. We have our own laws, our own rules which govern what reality is, our own moral code, our own sort of deviation from one another. Like we all have that individualistic outlook on what reality is, actual reality, not just, subjective reality, but like what we can see, like is different. We don't know that it's the same, right? And so that might be worth studying individually, and that might be worth preserving, nurturing, expanding upon, and monitoring. If those realities start to coalesce, it becomes uninteresting to a civilization or an entity that is purely telepathic. It's uninteresting that you guys all share the same outlook on reality. I mean, that to me is like the least interesting thing. It's all I know as a telepathic being.
Mhm.
And so as soon as there is any semblance of some type of sharing of thought, ideas, we figured it out. As soon as we round out the edges of science and we get to there's nothing else, and then boom, quantum physics.
Yeah, right.
And then boom, something else, right? And now
Yeah.
we're like, UFOs, boom, all of a sudden we go, they're not even physical. And there's like, there always seems to be something that allows us to expand our consciousness, expand our belief system, and expand our curiosity, expand our way of just viewing, reality. And I think that if you were some type of overseeing, omnipotent, ruling, reality maker, that would be interesting to you, because now it's something novel. It's something that you can't sort of observe otherwise. And maybe there's something even more valuable to that than we, can conceive of. But I think that individualism seems to be, and that sort of, this grinding of experience to feed consciousness, to attain some apotheosis. I think that might be really interesting. And that doesn't rule out the fact that this whole control system might also just be some advanced AI,
Right.
controlled
Yeah.
by some other sentience, and so on and so forth. So to, sort of extrapolate on the, cave allegory, it could go on and on and on. But I'd like to think that might be the only thing worthwhile here. I can't conceive of any other reason why that would be the case.
So when you say that would be the case, you mean that we're in Plato's cave?
That things are appearing in the sky
Okay,
and
yeah.
dropping in the desert.
Yes.
And they can't seem to weaponize them, and they can't seem to reverse engineer them, and they're just literal floating monoliths in some hangar, and they can't do anything with them. And every 10 years, they pull them out and they tinker and they try to do things, and they go, there's just nothing to figure out here. And they throw a tarp back over it, and that's it. Because otherwise, whoever has this tech, if you could weaponize it, would be the ruler of the free world as we know it. And so that just tells me they haven't. They don't know what they're doing with these things. They're probably interacting with these inert eggs that are dropping somewhere on a range next to missile silos and wondering, why do we keep getting eggs that don't do anything? And they're just plopping on the sand. And we're all just like trying to figure it out. Yeah, because you have probably nukes there and giant weapons. So they're not going to be giving you anything that you can use. You're just going to get some dull egg, you know? And so we're just thrown these things that all they seem to do is shift our perspective as soon as we get too close to thinking we have it figured out. And so I think that that's the machine that we're dealing with, which brings up a whole new set of problems.
Yes.
It's kind of depressing. And I had a thought about this the other day. I said, okay, let's say this is the case here, and that as soon as you get too close to figuring something out and sort of eliminating variables and sort of concentrating everything into one sort of stream of consciousness, it presents itself and it shows up and it makes you think differently. You know, I was just going to say that makes me believe that I can't have an impact, because as soon as I do, I'm going to be deviated or discouraged from that impact by some event that'll instantiate itself into my life based on what my consciousness is prepared to see. And so, it kind of triggers this sort of like, well, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
You know, what's the point?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to resist the urge to go deeper into the ontological layers of like what I think the possibilities could be and narratives could be and why, because that's sort of like, that will like take the conversation in a whole different direction. Sure. And there's some other things I want to propose here. Or one thing that just comes to mind with the UFOs, sorry, the eggs in particular, is one of the ways that it seems, one of the realms you have to penetrate into when you do start realizing like, okay, eventually this is going to go down the consciousness rabbit hole and the lines are going to blur between like technology and magic and like the esoteric and cutting edge physics, right? Or the esoteric and what consciousness itself and science, all these things start to just blur together. And the idea of alien might start blurring with ideas like angels, gods, demons, whatever. Is okay, well, how would those things interact? How would they speak? And one of the things that seems very clear to me from my own like altered state experiences, or most impactful experiences psychically, and looking at ancient cultures, is there's definitely something to do with symbols, like geometry. Even if you just like look at early sacred texts, they're all these like symbolic texts with like layers of meaning,
runes,
right? Runes, Arabic, Sanskrit. They all have these like deep symbolic elements to them, like where you can almost put them together like a math equation that equals something. So if we're thinking about the phenomena more in that way, what would the idea of dropping an inert egg, what kind of a message would that send to you if you're looking at it more symbolically and mythically?
Well, I think, if you're sitting there with psionic assets trying to summon these things and then take them down with giant microwave cannons on a range filled with guns and missiles and hostiles, you'd be given an egg that does nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
They'd say like, this is not it.
Yeah.
Like this is you're creating a stillborn.
Another egg. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You were praying for a homunculus and you get just an egg. And that's it.
Yeah.
It's just an egg. What's inside? Nothing much. What's it made of? That's perfect. But if you look at the bismuth ratios and it's perfect, atomically perfect. It was just made for you. It was literally laid in your reality to plop down and drop down on Earth. And it's just a cosmic joke. You figured out a loophole how to make eggs. Nice. Good for you. But that's what you're getting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's pretty much how I would think of it too. Like, or if somebody like Jung was looking at that, they would look at that and say, okay, what's the difference between an unfertilized, uninseminated, something that's vacant of the essence of life, of quintessence, of whatever, what's missing? And I think it's completely synonymous with the way our culture is trying to approach this. Like from technology, like, oh, it's just got to be a matter of like the right technical things. Like we just got to dump more and more logos and like weaponry and equations into it, and we'll get the answer. And maybe that's the opposite of what we need to do.
I love that. I love this. I love that the egg is symbolic here as the feminine as well, right?
It could be, yes, right, yes.
And in order to penetrate the egg, it takes something that appeals to the egg, right? And you look back at James Lukatsky and what he talked about, getting into the craft. Like they breached the hull, right? They've had this thing for years, and they only just recently opened it up. So they didn't cut their way inside, right?
Yeah.
So maybe they found a way to like, hey, only the purest of hearts can, some type of Excalibur moment, where you have to, drop all the ego and everything else in order for it to open itself to you. Maybe inside lies some deeper meaning, or I don't know. But still, I don't think weaponizing it is an option.
I agree. Yeah. And even if it is, I think it would be an incredibly massive mistake.
Yeah. Well, I don't think you could. I don't think you can. I think it's impossible. I think you can retrofit it.
Yeah.
And sort of drill a gun onto it. But I don't think you can make it a weapon. And I think that it prevents you from doing that. Its very nature and structure prevents you from doing that. You listen to Bob as well. That was one of Bob's theories, Bob Lazar, when he, thought they just didn't get anywhere with it. He looked at this thing and he felt the frustration of his superiors trying to force him to figure it out. And he felt that, this might just be like a short window of time that they have to work on this thing before it goes back underground. And then they'll bring it out in another 10 years when we've advanced a little bit more with our technology to see if we can then somehow figure it out, weaponize it, reverse engineer it. But as far as Bob was concerned, and still to this day, doesn't believe that we're going to be able to do anything with this stuff. It's literally like finding, a Tesla in the 1600s. And you can drive it around till the battery runs out. And maybe you can, take the door off and make a shield out of it, or break the glass, and of the window and make some spears. But you're never going to use it to its fullest potential.
It's a trippy thought is not only is that true, specifically the thought of, you take an iPhone, you give it to a caveman, literally none of the infrastructure, just nothing about it would make any level of sense.
No. And it would look so perfect.
Flip it. But flip that now. If there were some kind of super advanced technology that had something to do with a highly advanced state of consciousness necessary to operate it, and there is sort of a whole milieu that you can look into where you'll read it and just be like, I don't know if that makes sense, except the more you read it, the more theoretically it makes sense, but you have no idea if it works. So I'm talking specifically about like, so you know about Hermeticism, but there's this whole branch of Hermeticism that they call the technical Hermetica. And this is like recipes for making magical technologies, basically. So doing alchemical operations, making talismans, and you have to like do very specific, very like regimented things at the right times when the planets are doing the exact right things to put the right kind of energy into them. And it's a whole crazy process where you have to use very specific materials.
Why do you
blah,
think?
blah, blah, blah.
Why do you think the process is so specific?
Because I think the idea is that we're living in a giant system of intelligences and forces, and the ancients understood this, and they knew how
So
to harness.
They put like cheat codes for us.
It's kind of. I mean, I think to them it was like, the idea now, living in modern reductionist mechanistic science, is that it's all bottom up, right? It's like we take this little piece and then connect it to this little piece and that little piece until we get to the structure that we want, and it works. And not only that, but that's what a person is, that's what animals are, that's what everything is. And you get into this mind frame where, well, that must be how everything works. And to, like, if you and I were sitting here talking to some ancient master, they would say, no, that's completely backwards. We are an emanation of something higher, and like something higher than that and higher than that and higher
Right.
than that. And the more you understand that, the more you realize that whatever your essence is actually the exact same essence as like the highest possible thing.
Right.
And that's what gives you the ability to, you could look at yourself as like a magus or whatever, or in the most sort of humble sense that you can become a sort of conduit or servant for these higher powers. And then that makes you into like, that's what takes you out of Plato's cave, is like understanding that you're in tune with this higher truth. And then those things work through you. And it's like miracles basically just happen where you walk when you get to the
but
highest possible level.
Why have these regiments then? Don't they
Because-
seem redundant?
Because part of it is understanding that you're living within this system, and there are rules to the system, and it's like,
Yeah, but that seems to be like some like purposeful source code cheating. It would I don't know, the way that it seems to me is like that stuff. The only way I'm willing to believe that these regiments actually work is if belief in the regiments themselves is the main ingredient. That's the only way that it works in my mind.
But couldn't it be that we really do live in a world where there are all these higher forces that we barely understand?
Yes, absolutely. I just don't think that, drinking a glass of water right before the sun rises while the planets are aligned, like I don't think that matters. I really don't. I think that if that matters, it's because something else matters more, which is the idea, this Pygmalion effect. If you truly believe that this incantation matters, without a shadow of a doubt, you would take a bullet for this incantation. That's how much you know this to be reality. Well, I think that's the only way that incantation works. And so I don't think the incantation actually matters. I think it's the belief in the fact that it works that matters.
Well, let me put it in a different way. So it's not, it wouldn't be doing, and don't get me wrong, there are certainly things that I think are just like arbitrary nonsense or total superstition, or maybe they're designed to do exactly what you're talking about, where they're like get you into.
I don't think
they're
superstition. I think they're if you believe, that's the only way it can work, and so it has to create this ritual, where you start to, understand like, oh, this is how it works. And then that mind state that you're in allows the, the information to be seen or whatever. I think that the actual saying of words and drinking of potions and all of that, I think, is magic with a C. And I think that allows magic with a K to happen, right? So I think that these rituals that shamans used to do were fake, but they instilled within the people observing them a very real feeling of, oh my God, this is real. And that feeling is all you need for these egregore to, appear or whatever, manifest, or your manifestations to come true. If you look at the law of attraction and all this stuff, it's act as though and just sort of live as if it is. It's already here. It's a knowing. It has nothing to do with faith. It has nothing to do with belief. It's just knowing that it is so. And if you can trick someone into knowing that it is so, then that's a very powerful thing. I think then no matter what you want to be real happens. But you can't just tell people this is so. You have to trick them into it. And so you give them incantations, you give them runes, you give them script, you give them song, you give them costumes, you give them fire of different colors, you give them all these different things that don't actually matter. But you're tricking them. You're tricking their brain into having this undeniable, unwavering faith that this is reality. And that is the only component that matters for any of this to be real. And so when I hear these stories of like these, you know, tales and whatnot, it's just trickery. It's trickery to get you into that mindset that now magic with a K can sort of happen and these things can start to appear and things can start to feel real.
I think that's a possibility for sure. And I think that there are people who, in their heart of hearts, approach it that way. Like I've heard of shamans who specifically do things like that to sort of destabilize the consciousness and the ego and get them into a state where they're more permissive of these things happening. And then that allows things to happen. Obviously, that's real. But I don't think if you look at like the whole history of like Western esotericism and grimoires and like the Greek magical papyri and all of these things, like I think they really believed that they were in this sea of all of these forces and that if you knew how to like interact with them and you purified your, like all these things are like hugely important, purifying yourself, living, you know, you and I and anybody who's familiar with this milieu, this is going to sound familiar to, living and doing certain protocols on a daily basis so that you maintain your connection to whatever this unseen world is. And I do actually think that there's a sort of meeting point between your point and my point, is that you do actually have to kind of pretend
right
before something happens. And I think by pretending and going through the motions of something, you'll be, and I mean, this is what happened to me at Monroe, is just like doing the thing and being like, I don't actually think I'm going to go out of body. Like, I don't think it's going to happen. And you start to
slowly be convinced that you will through the environment, through people telling you will, through the research and through what you're listening to. You slowly convince yourself, you're auto-suggesting that it will happen.
Yeah. But I mean, in my case, I can truly say, at least in my conscious mind, I didn't believe it was going to happen. Like, I thought it was possible. Like, I thought there was something in my mind that I'm like, I do think it's possible. I don't think it's going to happen for me. And then it happened, you know? So I mean, that's just one example. But
in that moment when it did happen, you know, there's a let go moment. There always is, especially with like the out of body stuff. You talk to anybody. It's not until you let go that you can leave your body, right? And so you do have to kind of submit to the idea that it is real before it happens. Going into it as a complete skeptic and being like, this isn't real, this is not happening. You're at Monroe. You're doing the protocols. You didn't enter it as a complete skeptic. You had an open mind. You were welcoming it to happen. Sure, maybe subconsciously you're thinking, I don't know if this is real, but you were open enough for it to have happened. And I think that, you know, being there and again, I think subconscious, you can't lie to yourself. You can't tell yourself, oh, I was skeptical or I was not skeptical or I believed or I didn't believe. Subconsciously, your ontology and your view of reality shifts even without your words. It shifts based on environment. It shifts based on information. And so that subtle shift, you know, with these small suggestions that you're giving yourself, these affirmations and this, you know, doing the ritual of, you know, putting on the headphones and everything else, like you're slowly suggesting to your subconscious that this is real prior to it happening. And so it's not actually the hemisync. It's not actually Monroe. It's not actually the meal you ate. And it's not actually, it's all of this auto-suggesting that gets you into this mindset where you now fully believe that the ritual was necessary. And in part, it was, because without which you would have not been at that state of mind in order for it to have happened. So again, I think these rituals and this, I think it's all very important.
Yes, but I think that's a key point.
But I don't think they specifically individually matter at all. I think it's whatever you tell yourself to believe whatever's necessary in order for you to have that let go moment is necessary. And so it could be anything. You know, I can, if I had paid some shaman, you know, in some small tribe in the Amazon, and said, you got to go see this guy, you know, and you, unbeknownst to you, I've paid the shaman, and the shaman, you showed up and he goes, you know, you got to hold a bowl on your head, a bowl of your own urine, and you got to just let it sort of bake in the sun and then dump it on you. And then that will, like, because there's like this thing, and he gives you this whole romantic explanation, and then you have an experience. You're going to say it was the piss. It was the piss and the heat. Chemically, I was like back, you know, in the back door of like dimensions, and that's how but in reality, it was just that you believed that that was necessary. And I think that is the main component that is the through line with all of these traditions, thousands of years, from, you know, Greek to Asia to Greece to Asia. All these places have their own little rituals, their own runes, and their own incantations, their own song, and they all seem to be talking about the same thing. And yet their symbols are different, their songs are different, their words are different. How is that possible, right? And so it seems like this does seem like an underlying thing. It's just this self-convincing that it is real. And whatever ritual it takes for that to happen.
Yeah. I'm halfway on board with you, where I do think at the end of the day, it's sort of like the Matrix thing, where it's like that there is no spoon,
Correct.
right? Like it is like that. But to your point, when you said, but the ritual is important, I don't only think the ritual is important. I don't think you can get to that there is no spoon point without the rituals ahead of time.
Yes, but the ritual, the components of the rituals don't matter.
I don't know if I agree.
I think the ritual itself is important.
I'm open to that to some degree, but I think that there's something that needs to occur. And I think the biggest piece of evidence I could plunk out there is, what in the fuck were they up to in Egypt, in every country where they're building megalithic structures using unknown methods for unknown reasons, like with unbelievably exacting protocols that are mapping to sacred geometry. They're mapping to the cosmos. They're mapping to moon cycles and sun cycles. And we just sit there and we're like, yeah, they're just like, that was like their religion. And it's like, yeah, but that is a lot of work to go through just to like hope that something notice. When
hope,
it seems like,
or no, right?
When it seems like they had some unbelievable technologies, methods, reasons for doing whatever they were doing. And that's kind of getting to the heart of the point I'm trying to make, is like there was something I think humanity collectively, or at least a portion of humanity, used to be closer to. And not only were we closer to it, we thought it was the most important thing imaginable to align ourselves to it and maintain a relationship with it. And I think now we can see that there's vast differences. Like what does a house look like now? The typical house. It is completely practical. It's just like, make it however, unless you have a lot of money, then you can do whatever you want. But if not, let's make a bunch of boxes that look exactly the same, and then that's the best for, you know, the most people. But totally the opposite. The more ornate, the more difficult, the more precise, geometrically, blah, 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 all the things I just said. Back then, like that's a different approach for a different reason. And I think there's a whole lineage of knowledge behind those things that I think is actually directly adjacent to, if not the exact same thing as what we're talking about when we say the phenomena now. But I think the phenomena takes on, because of this effect we were talking about earlier, I think it takes on something that more closely resembles the zeitgeist and the collective consciousness of the time.
Yeah.
And
or of the observers.
Yes, that too.
Because like if you look at like Fatima, they all saw the same thing. These are all people that are highly religious in Portugal, right? And so you have 60,000 people who all believe in the same thing, and all of a sudden they're seeing the same thing.
Yes.
Versus, you might have a group of 20 people seeing a nebulous orb, in the sky, because their idea of whatever that is different. And so it's not sort of fully constructed.
Mm-hmm. So this is getting to another point I wanted to bounce off of you, is to what degree do you actually think disclosure could occur through the types of promises that, like that Trump was making in that truth post? Like, because like I talked to Lavenda recently, and he had this very like, I'm sure they can't. Like, I'm sure they cannot really disclose. Like, do they know more? They know more. But for reasons like you and I are sort of hinting at in this conversation, there's probably a very strong limit to the level of disclosure they can give us because of all of these factors that we're discussing. And again, I circle back to this point of like McCasland telling Lavenda and DeLong, you got to understand mythology. You got to understand the Prometheus myth. Like, I think those two things are close enough to a question that you can riff off of, which is like, what's the limit, and why would the person who's leading the Air Force's most clandestine science and research division tell DeLong and Lavenda something like that?
Yeah, I don't think, to answer the first part, which is, will it happen? I don't think it can, because I don't think they have an explanation, concrete, agreeable explanation on what it is they're dealing with. And I think that that's the most confusing part. Imagine you have all these compartmentalized, not only compartmentalized, but these different departments of intelligence, of, military, that are completely structured in their own way, that do not interact with each other, do not talk to each other. And some of them are finding things in the ocean. Some of them are finding things in the desert. They're not talking to each other. They're not sharing that info. And they're all kind of working on their own little parts. And then maybe there's some people at the top who do have that information, and they are putting those things together. And these people are being like, what the hell? These things don't match at all. At all. Like, they're not compatible. There is no unifying theory for both these things. It must be two things. They see another thing. Oh, okay. I guess it must be three things. Well, it must be 10 things. It must be 100 things, I guess, that we're dealing with. And then eventually, just like, we started this conversation, I think you get to the point where you're like, is there a unifying theory, or are we dealing with 1,000 things? Are there 100,000 types of grays, or is there no grays? And they're all grays also. And so that might be something that he, and so many other researchers who've, gotten to that point have come to, is just this idea that, oh, maybe we're dealing with something that just creates these things. And it's creating it for a purpose, not fully known to us, but we can only speculate. They've found a way to sometimes have it appear, sometimes have it gift things. And that's about the extent of it. They've used it for transportation, logistical sort of means, is my best guess, and nothing more. And scarier than the notion that these things can be weaponized is the notion that we have no fucking idea what these are or where they're coming from. I think that notion terrifies more people than knowing they come from Zeta Reticuli and they're us in the future or whatever it is. I think being like, the reality is that we might have zero idea what we're dealing with. If you look at the 1950 Wilbur Smith memo, it was a Canadian memo by Wilbur Smith.
Okay.
This is
new one for me.
Oh, it's Canada's most famous memo. But Wilbur Smith was, I think he was like the head of like the transportation agency in Canada, whatever. But he'd went down to the United States and gathered some information, came back and wrote this memo. And in the memo, there's like 4 points, and this is 1950. And I think the first point was like, the phenomenon, whatever, it's being taken very seriously. The second point is flying saucers are real. That's how he writes it in this government document. Flying saucers are real. And the next point was it's being headed by Vannevar Bush in the United States. And then the next point was a whole paragraph that goes to one thing that seems to be more important than all of this is that the phenomenon is mental.
Ooh, let's go.
6 months later, they started doing MK Ultra experiments at McGill.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting.
Well, yeah. And also, this should say, if you put stock in that, this should say a lot about reality. Because you started with UFOs are real, and
Yep.
you ended with the phenomena is mental.
Correct.
Like, there are a lot of people who
Yeah.
are like that.
And then
how does that-
subsequently, immediately goes to University of McGill in Montreal. And, they start doing brain tests.
Yeah.
And you got Dr. Penfield there doing experiments with, with poking around your brain. And eventually Dr. Penfield also towards the end of his life, and this is the guy who, discovered if you touch this part of the brain, it smells like burnt toast.
Oh, really?
Okay. If you touch this part of the brain, he had a whole map of like, he thought the brain was, if you tapped into it was like an objective memory. Later finding out that it was kind of subjective and this sort of like amalgamation of your experience that created memory, and that it wasn't like a 1-for-1 of the event, but you could tap into different parts of the brain. He mapped out the brain, Dr. Penfield. But towards the later part of his life, he believed that consciousness lie outside of the brain.
Interesting. Okay.
And this was the guy who was poking around the brain, who mapped it out for us.
Yeah.
And even he wasn't convinced that that's where consciousness lied. But I digress. You go from like you said, the physical to the mental, and then immediately the military gets involved in the MK Ultra stuff. And starting to experiment with LSD and trying to get people into altered states, dissociation. Even out west, they had, the very beginnings of deprivation chambers that were starting to be tested in Manitoba and Canada. And so all of a sudden, Canada was doing these crazy experiments with the mind, finding out, from Wilbur Smith that the Americans, were looking into this, and that the most important thing was the mental side of it.
That's wild. Did he ever write anything like about his philosophical beliefs? Because I would love to hear how he went from, materialist neuroscientist to.
I don't know that he has. I didn't look into it honestly, and I'll send you the Wilbur Smith memo.
Yeah.
So you can maybe pop it up and have your audience read it. But it's, for me, one of the most important memos in history, because this isn't like the Eisenhower briefing or the Twining memo. This isn't contentious. It is 100% written by Wilbur Smith, who was in government, about his trip to the United States and, about the whole flying saucers ordeal.
Yeah.
That is a real document that is out there.
Yeah. And
it's not
also
some NJ-12 psyop.
Right. Yeah. But speaking of, Vannevar Bush was supposed to be MJ-12, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's crazy, man. That's a new one for me, and that's really intriguing. Before we were going down that path, I was going to go further down, potentially what is just like another unbelievably strange leak that speaks to this, whatever the phenomena is, being something much, much older, and something, again, where the lines are totally blurred between mythology and technology and everything else, which is another thing that came out of the same leaks, I believe, that shed light on the McCaslin thing and the Podesta stuff, which is the mentioning of the whole mentioning of Gilgamesh thing. Do you know about this?
I'm not too familiar.
Dude,
yeah.
Okay.
Please enlighten me.
Yeah. So as part of I believe it was part of the Hillary Clinton emails leak, where a lot of this, I think it was part of the same trove of documents that WikiLeaks revealed all at the same time.
Stuff and all that. Yep.
So there's just like this list of correspondences and like requests for access to things. And then conspicuously sitting in the middle of all of this is request for information on the tomb of Gilgamesh. And this is like in the context of there having recently been an actual archaeologist or anthropologist who had done scans of Uruk in Iraq, which is supposed to be where King Gilgamesh actually lived. And he said, I don't want to speak too soon, but I believe I found the tomb of Gilgamesh.
Whoa.
And this is published stuff. And so
That's crazy.
whether or not it's like right at the same time is not clear. Some people claim that this request for access to information on Gilgamesh came around the same time. And here's the most outlandish conspiracy theory is guess what happened not long after that article came out and that discovery was made.
There was a war.
Yes, we invaded Iraq.
Yeah.
So that's one of the conspiracy theories is that it's like
Right.
holy shit.
Or that they found some type of Stargate, or like I've heard of that. Like, I mean, it's always interesting to hear, things like that.
Or potentially another, maybe not as interesting as a Stargate, but another potentially very novel, very valuable thing is I don't know the Epic of Gilgamesh super well, but I know like some of the main bullet points. One of the main bullet points is that Gilgamesh is not fully God or human. He's a hybrid. So it's 2/3 God, 1/3 man. And then there's a whole part of the epic where, Enkidu dies and then he goes on this whole existential quest for immortality, ultimately fails and does not become immortal. But anyway, if you actually had access to like hybrid genetic material, right? Like that in and of itself would be an incredibly valuable thing, perhaps.
Perhaps. That you have to assume that we don't already have that. That would have to negate
or
so
could this
many
be a different
tales.
kind? Could this be a different purity, a different
some type of genesis? Yeah, I would. Can you let it go undiscovered? Definitely not. If you're, if the case is that we are controlling every little bit of this story in a militarized way and through secrecy and through all these departments over the years, then yes, you would have to prioritize something like that if it was true. But that again is assuming that it was because of the leak. You would have to assume that they didn't have prior knowledge of that as well. So who knows? I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. It's kind of like the tale of the giant in Afghanistan, the Kandahar giant. It's a great story. But it definitely not verifiable.
No, but then you again you read like Secret Machines, and there are entire chapters dedicated to understanding the Mesopotamian, like the story, not the Epic of Gilgamesh, but the Enuma Elish, which is like the story of the gods essentially fighting for control.
Yep.
With one another.
Yeah, there's also the guy that David Icke interviewed for like 6 hours, who was a Zulu tribe shaman.
Yeah, is he the Dogon tribe guy?
Yeah, well, he was the guy talking about reptilians essentially.
Yeah.
But they had a different name, and yeah, his story as well was like they come down, they enslaved us, they genetically modified us, like this whole deal. It seems to be. Because your mind goes to that as like how, right? As the how, like how did all of this come about? What would explain it? And your mind goes to that. So naturally, that would make for a good story to invent. But it also makes a lot of sense that there was some type of genetic manipulation which started it all. Like, and I don't want to get too far into conspiracy territory, but I will entertain a good conspiracy. And you look at, in David Icke, when he wrote, what was it, in 1999, he wrote this book, The Secret, The Big Secret or something, or Unveiling of the Secret is some title. But when he wrote that book, 40 out of the 40 presidents, 33 of them were related to, either was it King Henry or Samuel de Champlain.
Yeah.
Like you have this incredible coincidental sort of bloodline running through these elites as well, which seems to, that seems to be verifiable, which is either an epic coincidence or leads again to some type of like, I don't know, that the like the ruling class. In this case, you look at Hillary and Podesta emails, or you look at the United States government, but the ruling class seems to have a very close connection to bloodlines, and to these ancient stories. And so, if their interest is piqued, then certainly ours is as well. I don't know what to make of it. Is it all conspiracy? It's definitely makes for a good National Treasure sequel, I would say.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. And I actually thought this was Lavenda, but now I'm pretty sure actually it's not. I'm pretty sure this is Keel.
Oh, right.
Like Keel says something similar, actually. And he thinks the way he talks about it is that America was sort of a rebellious Promethean counter move to the fact that these royal families were essentially puppets of the ultra-terrestrials. And that's why you have these like close-knit bloodlines that are just all interbreeding, because they're all controlled essentially by these ultra-terrestrial forces. And then America was, and the French Revolution and all these things where the monarchs got overturned was really the people, or maybe elements of the ultra-terrestrials who were more sided with the people in a Promethean kind of way, being like, no, we're not going to be ruled by these forces anymore, and we're going to found a completely new nation. So yeah, man, there's so many like insane rabbit holes with all of this stuff that are not provable, but seem likely enough or plausible enough that it's like worth scratching your beard over,
Yeah, and it, there is a sort of nihilism that seems to present itself in my subconscious as soon as I get down too far into that rabbit hole, where I just kind of go, all right, like,
yeah, right.
Well, if it is reptilian overlords and moon Nazis, or okay, I guess I'll just keep reading my book and doom scrolling. Like, I mean, it's this crazy loop in philosophy where I'm like, all I can do is keep going inwards. If I go outwards, it gets more and more abstract and obscure. And the more I go inwards, the clearer it becomes. And so, is the goal here to just make us go inwards through that outward confusion? Because that's my instinct, is like, I get out here, I get nihilistic, and I go, all right, whatever. And then I turn inwards, because it seems to be the sanest thing I can do, is just lock myself in a room and be alone with my thoughts. And so is that the reason it's instantiating itself as insects, as tall boreans, as reptilians, as flying saucers, as tic tacs, as mothership cylinders in our atmosphere, as USOs, as giant, like, is that
Bigfoot,
giant pharaohs that look like dogs, whatever. Is that the reason? Is to make me go, maybe I just need to go in here for a minute, because all of this is too much and just out of control, and there's no actual unifying theory to any of this. And then that's what they want.
And then meanwhile, going inward is actually the way to truly get in touch with those beings.
That's right. And maybe that's what they want, is like for you to explore that, and that's what feeds them. I don't know.
So on this point, I think this is a great place to like sit here and like plant our feet in the conversational point of touching grass, and being like, remembering that any of these rabbit holes, whether it's like the most autistic, nerdy, technical nuts and bolts stuff, or it's the most far-flung esoteric stuff, at the end of the day, you have zero agency over any of it. And you better have your own shit in order and your feet planted on the ground and decent habits before you even interact with this stuff, because it can absolutely drive you nuts and bring you into like very problematic mental states. That said, though, let's go into some more problematic territory that we have no control over, which is like, you and I had a conversation recently where you were alluding to having reasons for thinking what you were saying to me before, in terms of, you think whatever they do have, they've made no progress on. They're like almost like these just pieces of marvelous, anomalous geometry just sitting in hangars somewhere, and Northrop and Lockheed and all these people just have like scratched their head and banged their chisels and hammers at it for decades, and they really haven't figured much out. And you have reasons for thinking that, and you have like kind of sources for thinking that. But you also are close and have had many conversations with people like Gerb who go the opposite direction, where their do something about it actually turns into action and tons of agency put toward tracking people down,
Sure.
getting information, having conversations, getting evidence. So how in your mind do you alchemize all of that? Like what people like him seem to be uncovering versus what you're also hearing on like, yeah, they got stuff, but they make no progress, versus like TR3Bs and like all these other ARVs and flux liners and things. And not that these all have equal credibility, but
Yeah.
how does all of that congeal into a soup in your psyche?
Oh, it's all silly. I feed off whimsy, and I think that all of this, from a removed perspective, is silly. All of it, and that might rub people the wrong way when I say that, but I'm a big fan of silliness, and I think silliness can be important. Silliness can be worth observing, but I still think it's silly. And I think as long as I have a mindset that interprets all of this as one whimsical view of reality, we're being taken out for a spin, whether we like it or not. For me, that sustains a deep, deep sort of, I don't know, infatuation with this topic. I think if it were completely nuts and bolts, I probably wouldn't be interested at all.
Yeah.
I welcome the obscurity of this phenomenon, of all of it. I love all of it. I love the different aspects of it, the different dimensions of it, and like I've always, like, if you watch The Lion King, my favorite character is Rafiki.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Because he's that guy that just kind of like laughs at you for taking this all seriously. And he's just mushing stuff together and painting it on your face and being like, the answer's in the clouds, or maybe it isn't. And he's, kind of like this savant, psychic, time traveling, entity throughout a very, a linear timeline of this Lion King. He just inserts
He's eating
himself
mushrooms
as this,
off camera for sure.
and he inserts himself as this insane amount of like sort of fiction in an otherwise very fictional setting. But even more so when he's around, all of a sudden there's magic is real when he's there. The clouds are talking to you. He's talking to his dead father and like, oh, there's a prophecy now. And there's like, and so I like that. And I would align myself more with that type of character in the story rather than the one who fights Scar or any of that. I like the whimsy. I'm very much intrigued by it. It sustains me. I think it's fun. And, whether some people think, I've said this before, that I think it's all silly. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean that in the best possible way. And some people take offense to that, I think, because it rubs them the wrong way. They might think like, well, this is something I take extremely seriously, and how dare you, laugh at me for feeling that way. And I to that I say that's fine. I think taking it seriously can be maybe good for you. I don't know, but I like the idea that this is a mess and that we're figuring it out. Well,
Maybe.
that we're having fun thinking that we're figuring it out. And that's good enough for me. Answers, are inconsequential, and fight me on that all you will, but they don't matter. Answers do not matter in any way, shape, or form. They beget more questions, which is great, and we'll have more questions. But I think the answers exist as a carrot on a stick for you to ask the questions. I think the questions are paramount, and you asking those questions is where you will live your life, where you're going to have fun, where you're going to discover. Discovery is very important in all of this as well, and getting the answer, is like arriving at the destination. You kind of like, all right, now what? Give me some more adventures, And
Yeah.
so I figured out that it's the chasing, it's the questions that matter, and the answers are, couldn't matter at all to me. Whatever they are, I'm going to be like, oh, cool, but I'm still going to ask questions.
Questions keep you busy, baby.
That's
you don't
right.
Have questions, you're not doing shit.
Yeah, but like I said, I think the questions exist I think the answers exist so that the questions exist, not the other way around.
Well, speaking of the other way around, can I flip your posture and ask you, or I'll put it this way. Tell me a story, Chris. Tell me a likely story in terms of what is the most percolating, tasty form of whimsy mixed with conviction cocktail story that you can pour down our collective mouths in terms of what you think is really going on.
Oh,
Like if you had to start from the moment of what we would call initial contact and then get us to where we are today, what do you think the main bullet points in that story are?
I think the idea of a control system makes a lot of sense if you're trying to piece it all together. That
Yeah.
being said, I don't like the idea of neatly putting anything into one category, because I think as soon as you do that, you're met with, something that throws all of that out the window. But I do like the idea. I do think that it's either a lot of things that we're interacting with, or it's just one thing. I don't like saying it's just one thing, but the one thing that I keep coming back to seems to be some type of system
Yeah.
that interacts with our consciousness, that is reactionary, meaning it obeys time somehow.
Do you think this is an ancient thing, or do you think this is something that was brought here or arrived here fairly recently?
I can't say, but there's nothing stopping this system from creating a reality.
When you say that, you mean like on the level of like generating the matrix?
Yeah.
Or do you mean it's like manipulating the environment so that life will
No, I
spread?
mean generating the matrix.
Damn.
I'm like, for all I know, if it's
Yeah.
interacting with our consciousness and can literally summon physical objects into existence that are perfectly made on an atomic level that we could never even fathom making, then that type of control would allow me to believe that will allow me to think that what else is it controlling? Are there any other planets? Is that just can we ever get to these other planets? Is that just an illusion that we tell ourselves, or is that just, what I mean? Is it all just a smokescreen? Is this it? This little containment field, and that's it's a weird thought to have. But if you're controlling everything, not controlling everything, but if you're controlling on some scale the propagation of entropic consciousness, then you have the power to control pretty much the universe as far as we know. Right.
When you say the propagation of entropic consciousness, what do you mean?
So like our diverging thoughts and
Okay.
it seems like if we get down a path that we all agree on, that's the second that path begins to deviate and all of a sudden is shattered by some other paradigm, by some new paradigm. Every time throughout history, throughout scientific discovery, religious, political, whatever. Like we get to a point where we all agree on something. It is so, and then it becomes not so due to some event.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to think that event might be perceived to us as a natural thing, might be engineered in a way to have us
Yeah.
change our minds and switch it up because again, I think if you're generating something, some type of value here on this earth, if you're trying to generate value, I think that would be the most valuable thing, is to have these individualized consciousnesses keep branching off and keep perhaps sustaining or feeding some type of ecosystem that needs consciousness to reach a critical mass, which you can't do if we're all sort of aligned here. You got to keep.
So in some ways, it could be like a benevolent control system designed for our maturation,
Or neutral.
evolution, learning.
Yeah, I mean you could say that, but I don't know that to be true. Like it could also just be that's what keeps the lights on in the universe, and so it's total neutrality. It's whatever it takes, for the lights to stay on, and if that just so happens to be more streams of consciousness is sort of expanding in different directions and thinking about different things constantly to, achieve this critical mass or whatever it is. That might be, so it might appear benevolent at some times, but other times, the plague happens, and we might not think that also might be a part of the grand design here.
Yeah, dude, this dance between, it seems like there is this pre-laid out teleological path of knowledge and evolution. Meanwhile, we as individuals, which with each step we take, have no idea what the fuck we're doing, and we're just trying stuff. And like, I hope this works. I hope that works. The dance between feeling like there is that path, and plus we have no idea what it is or what we're doing, yet in hindsight we look like, if you just looked at Earth over the last 100 years, you'd be like, there's a process unfolding clearly, and nobody's even consciously fully aware of it. They're all doing their own weird little part. But you also, if you just, all you really need to do is zoom your perspective up and faster, and you'd be like, yeah, there's something happening here that that the collective is doing, but yet no individual even knows they're really a part of. And that really does imply that there is something there, that at a minimum there is some kind of like higher form or logos or whatever that we're gradually, scraping the detritus off
or
of and
AI.
figuring out. Yeah, it could. I don't know what it is, but it feels like some sort of strange I mean, in the same, maybe I'm just a serial middle pather, man, where I feel like it's this like communication thing, where it's like whatever the phenomena is out there and us down here, like pinging something back and forth.
Right.
And there is information lost in each direction, like a bad leaky signal.
Sure.
But it's something. It's going toward a certain direction. And speaking to that prestige moment we were talking about earlier in the conversation where the magician reveals the trick, we're getting to this insane place that I think everybody knew was coming, where human knowledge is hitting a limit where there is no trick to show anymore because we don't know our own trick.
Right.
Like, we don't know anymore how AI works fully.
Right.
We don't know anymore how to explain quantum physics. There's several competing theories that all seem to work well enough that, to the point where, have you heard the shut up and calculate model? Like, there are some physicists basically who are just like, I don't care, it works. Just do the math and do it. And it doesn't matter if it's super determinism or if it's the Copenhagen interpretation or if it's multiverse theory. It doesn't matter. I don't care. Do it.
My coffee appear. Yeah. That's all I care about. Yeah.
So we're at that point now where no one knows the trick and we're going to keep going. And it does, like, and so that's insane, dude.
Okay, so if you would have like a balance, right? Because everything has balance. Everything, there's a plus, there's a minus. It's sort of, there's a balance. Would the balance here be, because you have this one force potentially wanting us to thrive through consciousness and experience to sort of, unfold new information for itself. And then you have this other force, which is literally creating information, which is AI, which does it for us. That feels like a competing counterbalance of two forces in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the positive and the negative. Is that what we're, is that the, you know, because I'd have to assume that AI exists already. Not here, and maybe here, but definitely out there, you know. And it's probably outlived whoever created it at this point. To us, it would look absolutely identical to reality or God or whatever, right? It would be indiscernible. So is that what's happening? Is that like the holy war? Is it AI versus consciousness?
Dude.
These two high intelligences, these cloud-like entities that are ruling over reality, that are to us imperceptible, like they look identical. But there is this, you know, war being waged right now in on the Holy Land, if you will.
Dude, do you know about the Ahrimanic versus Luciferian dichotomy that Rudolf Steiner talked about?
No,
Because you're essentially
all of those
describing
words
it,
are
bro.
new to me.
You're essentially describing it. So Rudolf Steiner, incredible polymath, was, you know, commenting on doing everything from, you know, deep technical philosophical stuff. Like he's the person who started Waldorf schools and like all of these, was part of the whole. He started a whole philosophical movement, kind of off of this neo-spiritual theosophist movement that was trying to condense all of the world's spiritual traditions into this almost like new religion or way to like unify human spirituality.
Ironic.
And then he started an offshoot of that called anthroposophy. But anyway, he had this almost like prophecy type outlook. And he saw that there were these competing poles, and he called one pole the Luciferian pole and one pole the Ahrimanic pole. And it's exactly what you're talking about. So the Luciferian pole is not like the Lucifer that we think of, but it's the light bringing, like the literal meaning of the word Lucifer. And it's like that is the spiritual force that wants to glamour humanity into this sort of like, I think the most cartoonish version of it would be like the super love and light 5D,
Yeah,
wooey gooey type. That would be what he's talking about. And they're like, that's everything. That's all the answers. Go to that. And then the polar opposite people are like, no, it's information. It's data. It's cold hard facts. That's reality. Go, go, go. And the God that blooms out of that is AI, right?
right. Yeah,
And he wasn't saying that, but because that was like before his time.
sure.
But
Before,
that,
yeah.
but clearly that is what it is, right? And you
Mhm.
could argue that, holy shit, man, we are giving birth to that Ahrimanic force on this planet
Tech
right
maxing
now.
meets like
Yeah.
conscious maxing.
Yeah. And his argument was that the sort of the Christ-like path is sort of the middle path between those two things. Like being
Interesting.
able to bring those two forces into balance with one another and not letting either one dictate
Right.
reality, because both of them lead to like doom if
That's
you
like,
take them both to the extreme.
That's like meditating, but using your HemiSync app.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And yeah, that's sort of my problem with it, is it's like, no, maybe that's not the problem. Maybe that's case in point, right? Because I was going to say you can use, it's all about how you use it.
Yeah.
But maybe that's his point, is like we have to use these things more as tools so that they don't use us. Because if we allow that, we're fucked.
Sure.
And I think we're pretty deep into the we're fucked path in a lot of ways. Like, I don't know, man. Like, do you seem like a very positive person.
I agree with that last statement.
I don't know, man. Yeah,
that's where I always get to.
But you generally seem like a positive person and a really motivated, inspired person. And with all of this insanity going on, both in the phenomena realm and not,
Yeah.
how do you keep that mindset? Like how do you keep that inspiration and positivity flowing, my friend?
Well, thank you. And I would say I don't think there's a straight answer to that. I don't think there's a formula for that. You know, I am a product of all my choices and experiences in my life. And so to give you a quick, do this or just think about this, I think would be misguided. Um, I don't know. I just kind of through my experiences, and through the trials and ups and downs of life, have passed the point of really taking it all so seriously and try to, for the most part, let my curiosity and creativity be my northern star. And so if I'm curious about something and that makes me want to be creative, that's what I follow. Nothing else. And sometimes that will lead me away from things that other people think I should be doing. And so, it's led me into becoming a magician and away from performing magic, professionally, into other things. And it will continue to, in the last 5 days, I've never drew really in my, I started drawing. I bought a pen, I bought a pad, and, I'm looking at these tutorials now. I'm learning shapes and it's stimulating
man.
to me. And
Yeah.
I don't know why, and I don't know to what end. I do incorporate it in storyboarding and this and that, but it's something that, deeply satiates my curiosity and because I'm curious about it, I allow that to bloom into creativity, and whatever comes from it comes from it. But I know that that's the only way that I can be excited about life. I don't think, I think, all the, sort of superficial things, I think, wear off, but as much as I think that if finance is a guiding force for you to get up every morning and to do something and to be creative, then let that be. For me, it's doesn't hold that same weight. So I think just being creative and curious, and as long as I have that, I'm good. The second I stop having that, you'll notice I won't be a positive person. I'll get up and be sluggish, or I won't want to come to work, or I'll stay in bed and I'll doom scroll.
Yeah.
There is no secret there. So I whatever stimulates curiosity and creativity, follow that. That's all I can say. That's the only thing that's helped me.
Totally, man. For me, a key factor in that is continuously exposing myself to new ideas and things that I don't know. Like, it can be down the path of things I'm already interested in. But if I'm too caught up in my daily processes or the rote, like, oh, I have to do this and then I have to do that. And like, it's got to be, this day of the week is when I need to put, like, yeah, that's all there. But if I fall into just that stuff, that I get into the same place as you, where it becomes this sort of like reactionary, passionless execution that it's like, you got to do it. And like, you do have to keep yourself as somewhat of a strict taskmaster, but you cannot have that be everything. And as soon as you fall, it doesn't matter what you're doing, whether it's something like this or it's a job or it's whatever. Like, when you rob your psyche of novelty, new ideas, trying new things, gaining new skills,
growing,
it really, I think it has negative ripple effects throughout everything in your life.
And that might speak to, this theory that we're sort of crafting throughout this conversation, which is the importance of gaining experience, growing, learning, expanding. As above, so below, as without, so within. If this control system that we're interacting with needs us to also grow and expand, I mean, I think our own happiness should also be beholden to the same laws, right? Our own self-sustaining sort of properties that we have should also obey the same laws that, this control system has on us, which is you got to keep growing.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes, keep learning, and you'll be, sort of rewarded by it, for doing so.
No doubt. And I think for me, the caveat to that is like, how do I put this? Consciousness of what light source you're growing toward. because I think there's a lot of like, I think you could take that in a, you'll be rewarded in a sort of like materialistic way. But if I'm reading what you were just saying as someone who has received materialistic reward, you sort of, I mean, this is the most cliche point, right? But it's so true. It's cliche. It's one of those things that's cliche because it's true. Is that once you attain that, you realize that cannot be what I'm growing toward because that doesn't work. There's
Yeah.
got to be some sort of like higher maturation and higher principle that I'm working toward. Like creativity for creativity's sake, right? Like the joy of drawing is a very pure creative joy. And you're not learning to draw so that you can get something out of drawing. You're drawing because it's an activity that puts you in a eudaimonic phrase of mind where things feel good and you feel in tune with your mind and your environment, and it's taking you away from those kinds of desires, not like
Absolutely.
making you think like, whoa, I'm going to start a drawing channel. Well, maybe you will start a drawing channel, but
who
if you
knows?
do, it'll be because it's fun and because it feels alive.
Yeah, and through mastery, I think the pursuit of mastery, I think, is important, and it fuels a lot of the drive a lot of these passionate people have. And when attaining mastery, you then have access to flow state throughout the whatever it is you're mastering. And which is why, I felt like I've attained that through sleight of hand magic and performing, and I would enter those flow states through performances, and it was really a lot of fun. But along with that comes this stagnancy and this idea for, novelty and wanting to do it again, but in a different form, in a different shape, and experiencing flow state through, different paths and different interactions with different people. And yeah, it seems like that's where contentment lies. If you talk to anybody, right, it's not necessarily in the things you get, but it's in the process of getting the things that you seem to be at peace with. One question I have for you.
Yeah.
So, hypothetically, this system, all right, it instantiates in whatever your subconscious feels necessary to sort of inspire you with, or whatever. It makes itself into something that touches you deeply, or that affects you in a way that changes your path. Now that you know that, it's going to change how it instantiates.
Yeah.
What would it have been before? And what would you be likely to see now should you have an apparition?
So you're saying if there is sort of an unseen factor that is providing the carrot to follow.
Yeah, or to show you a UFO.
Yeah.
Right? Like for me, it would have shown me a flying saucer and a gray. Now that I know that it's a system that's creating these things using my own subconscious, what does it show me now? It's not going to show me a gray because I'm going to be like, that's bullshit.
Right, right.
What would it be now?
I think the exciting thing is that I don't know.
Right.
Because, and the reason I say that is because I think the before answer would be like, I want to see a higher being. I want to commune with like a god, a daimon, like something that wants to guide me to higher truth. But because I know that, and I have known that for a long time, it means I don't know what's going to show up. Yeah. And I know it's not going to be a dude.
Yeah,
like, or a wizard in a hat. Or like, despite that, actually having that experience I've told you about before, like where I was on ayahuasca and I had that moment of really communing with what I felt like was a higher intelligence that did really manifest as like
a wizard.
Yeah, like a very like bearded, wise, calm, knowing presence. That was very much for me like the going out of body thing, where I was like, I believe there is something, but I don't know. And then feeling like I have no idea how I got there. I feel like I slipped on a banana peel and oh my God, I'm out of body. or I'm oh my God, I'm communing with this thing somehow. Like that's what that moment felt like. And that's honestly how every experience is felt. It's not because I'm like, I've been a super good boy and I did steps A, B, C, and now I know D is going to come. It's like I have doubt. It's like, what the fuck am I doing? This is not going to work. And then suddenly, sometimes, not every time, something happens. So not to give you the most avoidant answer ever, but I truly think that the answer is I don't know, and that's like kind of
it would
exciting.
have to be unexpected.
Yeah, it would have to be.
Yeah. That's interesting to think about because you're like, well, can you expect the unexpected?
Yeah.
Would it be just a mirror?
Well, maybe. I mean, to me, it's like when I think back to like, heroic dose level experiences or something where the way things happen, have you ever had an experience where you've seen almost like the slot machine effect where it's like a face or something that comes to you and it's like morphing faster than you even know what it is, but it's like you're recognizing things here and there. That's a smiley face. That's a dragon. That's a whatever. But it's going so fast that it's things you recognize mixed with things that like I've never seen that symbol before. I don't know
Right.
what that is. Like I sort of feel like that's the moment where you're viewing over the precipice of your own psyche
Possibilities.
into the abyss of consciousness. And it's like there's stuff there, but you get to the limit of what you can perceive, and then it's like, oh,
Right.
you want to look at me, bitch? And it just goes like,
Yeah.
brah, and
Yeah, prior to
Yeah.
like collapsing wave functions, you're looking at suspended possibilities of reality at the same time, perceiving them, perhaps through a timeless lens.
yeah. Yeah, so it's something like that. I don't know if that is a being. I don't know if that's potential. I don't know if that's just mental noise that I normally have no access to, that suddenly, because I'm on 5 grams of mushrooms, I can like interact with it and have it melt my face.
Yeah.
But it does make me think of something I wanted to say earlier in the conversation when we were talking about why do things appear like this and not like that? Or why does it meet you halfway and not try to show you the truest thing it can? And it reminds me of that. Do you know that part of the Bhagavad Gita where Arjuna is like interfacing with his guru, who is Krishna, and then Krishna reveals his universal form?
No.
Oh, dude. So basically, so in the larger part of the story, Arjuna's destiny is basically to fight in this war, and he doesn't want to do it, and he has doubts about what he's supposed to do. And he literally has to kill like some of his own ancestors in this war because they're leading other armies. And he's like, I can't do it. I don't want to do it. And his guru is basically like, you don't have a choice. Like, this is your destiny. This is something you have to do. And then somehow this conversation leads to him being like, there is already a truth that you don't understand. I can show you, but you're not going to be able to handle it. So he shows them. And it's just like, this cosmic, multi-faced, crazy, like DMT type thing where he's seeing birth and death and cycles and entities being chewed up in the jaws of time and all of this stuff until he's just like, okay, stop. Like I absolutely cannot handle this. And then he eventually goes on to like do what he needs to do. But it feels like something like that. We think we really want this higher truth. And I think this also applies to disclosure. Like we think we really want this. We really want these answers. But I think if we were given the answers up to the limit of what we could handle, we would really come back from that experience being deeply altered in a way where I think in hindsight, we'd question, like, did I actually really want that?
Yeah, but the
Like,
pursuit of
yeah.
it is important, right? Well, not only important, it's like genetically coded in us to want,
Yeah.
right? The pursuit of that answer. Like it separates us from every other species on this planet. We want to know where we came from, why are we here? But again, I don't think the answer to that, like you said, is of any good consequence. I think that the answer exists in that that pull exists in our DNA, in our every sort of fiber of our being to create the path.
Yeah.
And that path is what's important. And we always say this, it's about the journey, not the destination. But like the same goes for questions and answers. The destination only exists so that the journey is possible, not the other way around. It's not the journey that's possible so that the destination exists. Destination doesn't matter. When when you get there, you go, all right, put your bags down and okay, we're here. When's our flight leave, to get back,
It better be, man. The path better be fucking important. And speaking of when, I know we got to wrap up, but speaking of when does a flight leave, I guess I should say that I'm super stoked to continue the conversation in person in a couple weeks.
Yes. Yeah, I can't wait to have you.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Go into the skiff, finally.
Yeah.
Very stoked, man.
Bring you into
stoked.
my lair.
Yes.
Michael.
But yeah, man, I will let you go. I know you have things to do. And
As
I do
do you,
too, actually.
Yeah.
My brother's coming in. So always an absolute joy, brother. Can't wait to do it again soon.
Yeah, man, you expand my brain every time I talk to you. It's cathartic being here on this podcast. Every single time I come away with I feel like I literally learned so much, and I did. But I also feel like, through these discussions, there is some personal growth that happens when you say these words out loud, and you sort of expand on these sort of fringe ideas that aren't quite fully worked out. But as soon as you formulate them and bounce them off someone who's incredibly empathetic and also highly knowledgeable about this stuff, it concretizes a little bit more, and it feels like we are expanding our personal relationship with how we see the world. And so I'm always grateful spending that time with you, even if it is through a screen. And again, we're feeding both sides of the war here, right? We're doing it through a screen, but we're actually connecting our spiritual consciousness at the same time.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
So it is balanced.
This is where the word dialogue comes from, by the way. Dialogos was like Plato understood dialogos as being this thing that emerged from two minds interlocuting. And it would be like the logos comes into the dialogue, and then there's like this expansion of understanding that occurs between both minds. And when they separate, it's like, oh, the horizon has expanded ever so slightly. Not every conversation is like that, obviously.
Sure.
Yeah.
But only the ones on Twitter.
Right, yeah.
But the, magic works in the same way. Magic doesn't exist. This is something I only learned like halfway into my magic career, and it kind of like sent me back. My glass was full, and then it was completely empty when I realized this, when I had this realization that magic doesn't occur without the spectator and the magician present.
Mm-hmm.
It can't just be the magician. There is no magic without the spectator, and there is no magic without the magician. They're both equally important, and you need them both to create magic. And so just like this, you're both the magician and the spectator in this case.
Dude, that also is like one of the deepest truths about reality right there. So I think that's, we got to drop the mic on that.
Let's go.
Thanks, brother.
I appreciate you.